10, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
We are ready for the event.
South Suburban College, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
Station, this is Congresswoman Robin Kelly, joined by Senator Dick Durbin at South Suburban College, here with our students. How do you hear me?
We read you loud and clear. We're very excited to talk with you and the students today.
Thank you so much.
Tim, do you have any advice for the future generations of scientists and astronauts?
You know, I think my advice to future engineers and astronauts is to work really hard and study hard, just like your parents say, because whenever you work hard and you put a lot of time into something, you get better, and it's like money in the bank, and you can use that later. And the other thing I would give you as a piece of advice is that you should dream big, because the bigger your dream, the harder you work, and the more you'll achieve.
After spending 6 months in space, what kind of problems do you encounter when you return to Earth?
That's a great question. Because we're here in weightlessness, we don't exercise our muscles even moving around the space station like we do on the ground when we walk and do all the things that we have to do to fight gravity when we're on the ground. So if we didn't exercise up here, our muscles would atrophy. In fact, our bones would atrophy and get weak as well. So to keep our muscles strong and our bones strong, we exercise every day. We have a treadmill and we wear a harness that pulls us down into the treadmill to be able to run on it. We have a cycle ergometer that's kind of like a stationary bicycle, and we use that also for exercise. And then finally, we have a machine, we call it the resistive exercise device, and it's the equivalent of lifting weights in the gym down on Earth. And we use all that equipment to keep our muscles and our bones strong and prepared to return to Earth.
Tim, please tell me a little bit more about space food. What did you eat today?
What did I eat today? That's a good question, you know, because food's important, right? Food it tastes good, and, you know, you sit around the table. In our case, we float around the table and we have conversation. So I had some tuna fish. I didn't bring any tuna fish, but I brought a package of tortillas. And a lot of times we'll put food on tortillas just because it's easy to eat and it's tasty. And, you know, a lot of our food comes in rehydratable containers like this, and we plug it into a water adapter, and it fills it with hot water if you want hot water. And then we can also fill up drink bags. In fact, I have a drink bag right here where we have our water dispenser, and we can fill it up and have our drinks as well. And then some of our food comes in packets like this, and we put it into a little heater, and after about 10 or 15 minutes, our food is hot. So that's what we do, and food's good here.
For Jeff, how was your understanding of the universe change after seeing it from space?
Boy, that's a very profound question. I don't know if it's changed a whole lot about the whole universe, but I suppose it has. But in particular, it has changed about my view of that part of creation we call Earth, which is our home, and seeing the resources on Earth, seeing the atmosphere on Earth, everything that provides for a habitable place for us to live. I've grown to appreciate that significantly, looking at the crops and the agriculture and the human activity around the globe as we circle the globe every 90 minutes. I also appreciate the mathematical order in the universe. The fact that we can fly in space and we can launch on a rocket and rendezvous with the space station is because there is precision in the order in the universe. So those are just a couple of things that I've grown in my appreciation for spending time up here on the space station.
For Tim, what happens to cargo ships once they leave the space station?
Well, it's a great question. It depends on the cargo ship. And right now we have 2 cargo ships docked to our space station. We have a Cygnus vehicle that's just behind us, and it's still full of lots of equipment that we need to unload. Once we're done, we'll pack it full of our trash, and once it leaves station, it burns up in the atmosphere. In front of us, we have a Dragon vehicle, and the Dragon is getting packed up, and all that equipment will land in the ocean. It'll come down through the atmosphere, and then a parachute will deploy, and it'll land softly in the ocean, be retrieved, and that equipment can be reused back on Earth and then sent back up here.
For Jeff, what is it like living in space? What challenges do you face, and what do you like about it?
Oh, there's a lot to like about living in space. Of course, you can do a lot of things in weightlessness that you can't do on the Earth, and we take advantage of that. The view is great. You never get tired of viewing the Earth out the window. We all up here are in the habit of taking lots of photography of the Earth. There's a never-ending variety of landforms, ocean, weather currents, horizon, sunsets, sunrises, moonsets, moonrises, just everything you can imagine. And perhaps you've seen some of the photography that we've been able to take. So it's very interesting living up here. Some of the challenges are just practical. It's hard to manage things if you're trying to handle a few things and you let it go. Sometimes it'll drift away and you lose sight of where it is. So it's very easy to lose things. So you have to learn how to manage your stuff as you work up here. But overall, it's just it's a lot of fun to be here. We all become kids again. I think we love to play with our food, tossing candy or whatever back and forth, or eating or drinking a bubble of water that's floating in the air in front of you, things like that.
For Tim, do you sometimes feel frustrated in space because you cannot move around normally?
No, it's a great question. I don't think I've ever felt frustrated, but definitely when you first get here, you're really uncoordinated. You feel clumsy and awkward. And what I've found is we've been here for a little bit over 4 months. Over time, you become more and more adapted to your environment. You move in a different way, and you become maybe a little bit more graceful. You know, you still bump into things, but I wouldn't call it frustration. I would just say that sometimes we're a little bit awkward up here, and we have to get used to moving around in space.
For Jeff, what do you miss the most from Earth?
Oh, the answer to that question should be obvious. It's family, friends and family. That's what we miss the most, and that is always the first and number one on the list. It's a long time being up here. We were in Russia a couple months before launch, so you even add that time to the time up here. So it can be 7, 8, or 9 months separation away from the family. We have good connectivity. We talk every day. We have a video conference with our family once a week, so it's good in that way. But then there's some practical things you miss up here. You miss the smells of nature, of the sound of the breeze, chirping birds, things like that we take for granted. We don't have any of that up here. We live in a pretty sterile environment. We don't have a lot of quiet up here because fans and pumps are running continually, so you can't get to a place that's quiet. So those are, on a practical level, some of the things that I miss up here.
For Tim, can you tell us about some of the experiments you are currently working on?
You know, it's a great question because our main job up here is to work really as an extension of the scientist on the ground, because we have this amazing orbiting laboratory. A lot of the experiments we do here on board are to understand the effects of zero gravity on the human body. And so we have an ultrasound machine, we have some very high-speed scanners and photography for our eyes so we can understand the impact of zero gravity. But then there's really interesting science experiments as well. I had the opportunity to work with a combustion experiment here on space station. So we were burning items. So there's a full gamut of different kinds of experiments, some to focus on the human body, some on physical science, and then some on technology as well. So it's a huge variety pack of things for us to do, and hopefully we can produce some really great science for the ground.
For Jeff, so what do you do for fun while you're in space? Can you watch TV, Netflix, or surf the internet?
Well, most of the fun that we have up here has to do with being in the space station and in a weightless environment. Personally, I have kind of a rule where I don't spend a whole lot of time doing things that I can do on Earth. I want to take advantage of the opportunity of being here. So, of course, you know, we have email and we communicate in other ways with friends and family on the ground, so we'll spend time on that. But most of our free time is spent in a window studying the Earth and taking photographs of the Earth, or doing our own little experiments, trying to maybe take a videotape of how water floats around and how fluids behave in space, or objects behave in space like this, so that we can try to demonstrate weightlessness. But mostly it's just having fun in the weightless environment.
For Tim, how was the International Space Station built?
Great question. The space station was built mainly through rocket launches on the Russian side and through items that were in the payload bay of the space shuttle. And so it was built piece by piece. This module that we're in right now, the U.S. lab, went up on a space shuttle, and little by little, the space shuttles brought these up. They were removed out of the payload bay with a robotic arm. They were connected with a robotic arm and then assembled with spacewalkers out in space. And so after many, many dozens of flights, actually, we're able to have this tremendous station. And it's been a very long and arduous process, but we're very, very proud of the work that the entire lineage of people that have contributed to this program have done.
For Jeff, how are you trained to know where every button on your How are you trained to know where every button on your space is?
That's a great question, because this is a huge space station. It would be the size of a 5,000 square foot house, and there are buttons and controls and computers and instruments and other things all over it. So we have this great ground team in mission controls centers around the world, to include Houston, which is of course the main mission control center for NASA. A team of folks that do all the planning for every day's activity, and part of that planning is precisely telling us what we need to do as we go through each procedure, so that we have those references to look at if we need to find stuff that's stowed away, like in a closet somewhere. We have to go collect up the equipment for an operation, and then every switch throw, every button push, every computer action is specified in a procedure that team on the ground has prepared for us.
For Tim, how much oxygen supply do you have in the space station?
You know, it's a great question, because the environment in which we live is exactly what we bring up here or what we produce. And so we keep a reserve of oxygen. We have maybe, 4 months or so of reserve oxygen here on board. But we produce oxygen, and there's air that comes up on some of the Russian resupply vehicles, and so we always keep a good supply up here. We have some tanks that we actually load oxygen outside our vehicle for spacewalks, and we use that oxygen for certain things. So we always keep a buffer, and we actually have some emergency measures to produce oxygen if we need to.
For Jeff, how did you adjust to Earth's atmosphere after you came back from space?
Coming back from space is quite a shock to the system, because we're up here, we're in that weightless environment, so we're not experiencing the tremendous force of gravity while we're up here. And after being here for 6 months, it's quite a shock on the body to get back to Earth, and to even to stand up for the first time, maybe minutes after we get out of the spacecraft, the capsule in the middle of Kazakhstan. So we go through a rehabilitation program. We work with trainers in the gym every day for about 45 days or so, doing weightlifting and stretching and flexibility exercises to regain the strength that we weren't able to maintain on that equipment that I talked about earlier. You also have a sense of balance that you have to kind of not regenerate, but you have to regain your sense of balance because your vestibular system, which provides your sense of balance, doesn't work up here because it depends on gravity. So that can take a few days before you get over your dizziness or your awkwardness in terms of sense of balance. And then the final way that you're affected, a major way that you're affected, is a potential for bone loss. I mentioned your muscles get weak and your bones also get weak if you don't exercise effectively up here. We have better equipment up here now than we used to have, so we don't have this problem as much as we used to have, but we used to suffer bone loss, which could take up to, a year and a half or 2 years to recover from.
This is for Tim. How do you mentally prepare to be in space for so long?
You know, it's a great question. We have a great training program that actually starts from the very beginning when you become an astronaut. And we focus on making sure that we're technically competent so that we know exactly what our job is. And if you know what you're doing, if you feel competent and you have confidence in what you're going to do, I think that reduces the stress. But in terms of the long-term time we spend up here and away from training, it's really a step-by-step process because, you know, both Jeff and I spent a lot of time away from home in training, and so maybe a month at a time. And frankly, that actually prepares you for separation from family because you're used to that. Even though it's not comfortable and you don't like to be away from your family, you get used to it to a certain extent. And then we also train as a crew. We've both spent time underwater for over a week at a time, working with a small crew in a very intense kind of mission. We've been on camping trips with small groups with very challenging scenarios. And so all those things piece together to make us well prepared to be away from home and to work up here for a long period of time.
What happens if there is a medical emergency?
That's a great question because only occasionally do we have a medical doctor on the crew, because there are a few astronauts that are medical doctors. Most of the time we do not, though. So most of us, and Tim and I both, have gone through extensive training on the ground in the medical field. We've spent time in emergency rooms working in real hospitals with real cases. We've got a staff of trainers at NASA in Houston at Johnson Space Center that train us on all the medical procedures. And then we have a staff of doctors and medical technicians in Houston that serve in the Mission Control Center, and they're always on council. And if we have something occur on board here, we can do the immediate response for an emergency, helping each other out. We're well equipped. We're equipped like a small emergency room here on board the space station, so we have all the equipment. And then we would have that team on the ground help us through any procedures or further response that we need to do in the event of that medical incident.
For Tim, what personal belongings can an astronaut bring along with them?
It's a great question because you want to bring things that remind you of home and sort of give you that mental comfort. I think all of us bring lots of photographs of our family and our friends and maybe some of our favorite places. We're actually not very constrained on what we can bring up. It's really about the volume and the weight of what we bring up. And so a lot of us bring some of our favorite books, maybe some T-shirts from your university or something that you're very fond of. And so it's just things that remind you of home. And then one nice thing is that oftentimes we'll have crew care packages that come up on our visiting vehicles. And so, like just today, I opened a letter from my wife that she had sent up before, and I have a ball cap from a university in my hometown, University of Texas. So those kind of things, they add to the experience and remind you of home and make life that much better.
Tim and Jeff, this is Senator Dick Durbin. We want to thank you, but I have one last question that wasn't on the script. I saw the movie Gravity, and since I saw that movie, I've been concerned about space trash. And I want to know if you have any concerns or there's any danger with trash that's flying through space that might hit the space station.
We know, sir, it is a great question, and you know, this is not without risk. You know, one of the great things about NASA and the work that we do is everything we do is focused on risk mitigation. And so I think we have good confidence that we know where all the items are that are bigger than a softball, for example, our station can protect us from everything that's about a large marble and smaller. So there's that middle category that actually is, we're exposed to because we have very good technology. We understand a lot about our universe, about our planet, and everything that's in between. But we don't know everything. And so one of the things we do here on board is we train for emergencies. And one of those emergencies would be a rapid depressurization, in which case we know exactly what to do. We're very well trained and we have a sequence of events. So even though we're exposed to risk up here, we mitigate it as best we can. And we recognize there's risk, but we know that the benefit from our space program, especially our human space program, exceeds any kind of risk that we may be exposed to.
Well, Tim and Jeff, I think you'll agree that we've had some extraordinary questions from our students today, and we are so proud of what they've asked you, but we're even prouder of what you are doing to represent the United States of America at the International Space Station. You are inspiring these young people and many more just like them to follow their dream for science, technology, engineering, and math. Thank you so much for sharing your day with us at South Suburban College.
Thank you so much, sir.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the event. Thank you.
Thank you to all participants and guests at South Suburban College Station. We are now resuming operational audio communications.
Thanks, Luca.